Backstage Live. My name's Ed Stetzer. I'm broadcasting to you live here at Wheaton College. I actually were a couple minutes late. I was just literally having fun with two of our new students, Ann Camp and Christine Kane, and so sort of fun. And we ended up talking, and I just literally walked by and said, "Am I on?" And anyway, so here I am. But we have some amazing, amazing leaders we're going to be talking about today. But let me say first to you, thank you for participating in this Hero Maker series that we're doing here, and we're very excited about what's going on. You know that Exponential, of course, is often known as a conference, and it is a conference, but we have this opportunity to be with key leaders who are speaking at these conferences, and particularly some of our regionals as well. So we're going to be talking with two guests in just a moment. Before we do, I want to ask you, if you're watching now on Facebook Live, if you would take just a moment to like and to share this, even if you're watching this later, if you're not watching this live, because it'll be there. If you wouldn't mind, just take a moment, like and share, so other people can hear what's going on and gain and glean more information about what we're doing here. And again, we're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on in permission giving and how do we give permission to others in and around spaces of leadership. Now, I'm going to ask Brooks just a moment to put up the upcoming conferences, because we'll be engaging in some conversation that do relate to these. So I think Brooks is going to put that up here. This is the Exponential Hero Maker theme. You'll see different places there on your screen, so take a moment and to be aware of that. This webinar is particularly going to be on the practice of moving to hero makers, raising up others, take the focus of leadership off yourself and actually empower others for ministry, mission, and leadership. We're going to talk some about this throughout this webinar today, but kind of the idea of, I see this gift in you. Ultimately, where Jesus gives permission, Acts 1:8, my spirit's come, you're going to be my witnesses to the ends of the earth, where Jesus gives that permission and blessing. Essentially, he says to us, we're going to be engaged in this mission and ministry. How do we engage others as well? We're going to press into really maybe how to measure success in our churches, the danger of primarily being numerical growth, lots of things here. But before we do, I want to introduce you to our guests, right? So we're going to start with Autumn Katz. Autumn is the co-pastor of Anthem Church in Long Beach, California. Heart full is to inspire the ones far from God to passionately follow Jesus, to be released to their full potential. She actually held the title of being Mrs. Long Beach in 2017, which has opened some pretty neat doors as well. She has a single now, Sound of Rain, actively involved in her community, working with city leaders, advocating for women's voices, speaking, how people can speak with confidence. She's actually partnered now with Danielle Strickland, who I'll introduce in just a minute, to create the Women's Speakers Collective to prepare, practice, platform, and profile women speakers. She also serves as the West Coast Divisional Leader, Field Director for Stonecroft Women as well. You'll find Autumn at local coffee shops with her husband, Daniel, and enjoying time with her 4 kids. So welcome, Autumn. Good to see you, and hopefully you're suffering for Jesus there in Southern California.
Yes, definitely. It's good to be on. Thank you.
Good. All right, good. And we also have Danielle Strickland, who I just had the opportunity to hang with just a couple of weeks ago. Danielle, good to see you again. Thanks for being at the Amplify Conference. She's an officer in the Salvation Army, currently working in Edmonton, Alberta, leading Stop the Traffic. It's an anti-human trafficking campaign in Canada. We had her speak at our Amplify Conference because she's a gifted evangelist, widely sought after as a speaker, and she and her husband, also a Salvation Army officer, have 3 children as well. So good to see you again. You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, except most of that was wrong, just for the record.
Okay, well, that's great. I just go with what they give me from Exponential.
Yeah,
so
I don't know who gave it to you.
And you tell me. Tell me what's correct.
Yeah, here's a correct one. I am no longer an officer with the Salvation Army. Now speaker, author, advocate, sort of traveling and launching some nonprofits. I live in Toronto, Canada.
Toronto and Edmonton are pretty, in Canada, Americans pretty much is just Canada.
Yeah. I just usually call it America's largest national park.
Exactly, fair enough. I call it America's hat, but either way it works. Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
But still a gifted evangelist and still a widely sought after speaker. So technically still married, still has 3 children. So, I mean, not all wrong. So
yeah, nailed it.
I like to pace myself. I like my errors to be egregious and overwhelming. But anyway, so here's what I want to say to this page right here.
Okay.
Take this up here and move this over to the side. All right. So it's all good. All right. So we're going to talk some about issues of well, again, that hero maker theme. It's a theme throughout the Exponential Conference. So let's just jump right in. And either one of you can begin, but Danielle or Autumn, today we're talking about what it means to be a hero maker, especially as a church leader, how to become permission givers. So let me start by asking both of you, who were your hero makers? Who really helped you to find your voice and your place in leadership?
Yeah, I can start. Besides Danielle Strickland, who I'm just so excited to be on this call with, she's been a hero maker in my life.
And she's pretty awesome, but did you know she's not with the Salvation Army anymore?
I do know that.
Okay. Sure
I do know that, but she does have 3 kids.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But Danielle, just somebody who said yes in my life. And another one is the Walkameyers, Larry and Deb. They live close here in Long Beach, and we're actually our sponsoring church here. And they're ones that just had that conversation. This is what we see in you guys, and we're so excited for what God has for you. And they're true hero makers for my husband and I, for sure.
Nice, good. Daniel, let's go to you, Daniel. Well, who would be for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. This week I have a hero maker for me named Commissioner Ingrid Lindberg. She's a Swedish little old lady that really schooled me in the things and ways of Jesus when I was just up and coming as a leader myself. And she is in the hospital right now in the process probably of going to glory. So it's kind of a great week to talk about, for me, the kind of influence that she had, both setting an example, but also seeing into my potential and speaking into it. And then even sharing that thought with other people around her who could make a way for me to do leadership stuff. So she's one. The second one is General Eva Burrows. She's now with the Lord. She was a world leader of the Salvation Army for many years and kind of mentored me, spoke into me, made a way for me in ways that I probably don't even know, to tell you the truth, to this day. But she was definitely a hero maker for me.
Good deal. Let me remind people that they are watching Exponential Backstage. I'm Ed Stetzer. We're here with Danielle and Autumn. We're talking about hero making. Let me remind you too that you can actually ask questions. And Brooks, I don't actually see the chat on my screen, so if you'll put a note up there so I can be aware that chat is functioning. But you can actually ask questions. Yeah, I can see Brooks. Thank you. So you can ask questions through several different means. Of course, if you're logged on directly, you went through the Exponential page to get there. You can actually engage in questions, questions at that site. You can't use them. You can't do questions at Facebook Live because we're not actually monitoring Facebook Live, but you can again like and share the questions there. So let's continue with some questions. And Exponential is talking about throughout this whole year the 5 essential practices of hero making. One of them is being a permission giver. So let's go back to Danielle, since you were just first. Since you were second, what would you say? What does it mean for you to be a permission giver, and how are you doing that to raise up other leaders as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this a lot. I was thinking about the way that we see permission giving. I think is a way that we view not only other people, but also ourselves and the mission that we're a part of. So if your vision is small, you're going to be like a control freak and not a permission giver. I think for me, permission giving is allowing people the opportunity to try and use their gifts and abilities in the way that they were meant to be used. So it was really interesting because I was thinking to myself, like, how has this worked for me? And one of the things that I do regularly is I actually remember my own stories of trying, even when it was a failure, but of all that I learned and the way that increased my capacity. So it really helps. I don't know if this happens to you, Ed, but when you get older, you start thinking like everyone's too young and no one's ready enough. You start going, oh, they can't be ready for that. It helps me to remember my own journey and realize like how unprepared and unready I was when I first gave it a go, whether it's ministry or speaking or leading or evangelism or whatever it is, and how often I probably didn't get it right, but I sure did learn and got better and better as I gave it a shot. So permission giving, I think for me, is this posture that says, yes, try it, do it. Let's see what happens.
Nice. I like it. Let's go to you, Autumn. What would you add?
Yeah, I would add just having those initial conversations, I see this in you. And when I found out so many times that when I'm sharing that with people, they all of a sudden see themselves in a new light. And just to be able to say, I see this in you, and to be able to bring them in and alongside what you're doing, and, you know, making a way for them. It's just, I've seen lives just open up and then believe themselves what they're called to do. And I think also a big part of it is carrying the heart of God and being able to say, I see this in you, but also I feel the heart of God for this in you. And I want to make room for that, however I can.
Awesome. Nice. Good. Talk to us a little bit about when you were when you were at the Salvation Army, formerly at the Salvation Army, Danielle. How did Autumn, when you were there, how did Danielle give permission where you were working with her at the Salvation Army? What doors and opportunities did she open for you? Give us some specifics about the two of you and your relationship.
Totally. So she had her office, and then I was over in a cubicle on the side, and I'll never forget Danielle just saying, like, come on in here, let's talk about this. And so I'd, you know, jump into her office and we'd have these conversations that had the potential to be like dynamite, amazing, the things that were talked about. But for me, just, she brought me in to what she was doing. And it wasn't a complicated thing. It was just exactly like she said, it was the yes, let's try, come on in, join the conversation, and be here with me as we talk about this. And that specifically, oh my goodness, I was just like, I can't believe that she's just bringing me into what she's doing and that she sees potential in me enough to bring me into these conversations.
Did you have a plan when you did that, Danielle, or was it more relational? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit more intuitive. It wasn't, I think it's a little less intentional now and more intuitive. So, and also I feel like a big part of I'm a relational leader. So I kind of almost thrive in team. Like I love I love people's input, and I love people's perspective, and I love bouncing things off of people as well. So I feel like we're really better together. And Autumn obviously was not hard to make a hero. She's already heroic, and her capacity's through the roof. So really I had more to gain than to give in that relationship, for sure. But I was thinking about this too. When you have a vision that's too big for you, it's easier for you to invite people to help you, which I think is one of the hero maker postures. Like, to have if you have a vision that is just for you, then it's harder to make room for other people because it feels like you're losing something. But I tend to be involved in things that are beyond me, and I know it, and everybody knows it. Like, this is going to be too hard for me. So it makes it an easier thing. It actually just makes it more of a logical thing to say to somebody, hey, can you help? I'm going to need some help in this. Yeah.
So there seems to be, I mean, you mentioned Autumn having certain gifts already that your role was to help find and develop. So, I mean, this is a harder question. But how do you, because that means you're seeing some people and saying, maybe they're not as strong to develop in this area. Do you try to develop everyone equally to the level they can go? Do you focus on some that you think are uniquely gifted? How do you think about that in your own role?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you, Danielle.
Yeah, I think it has to do with hunger, personally. So in my experience, like, I've tried to offer development to people that aren't interested in it or feel threatened by it or just don't want it. And if that's the case, that's cool with me. I don't try to develop people unless they're hungry to be developed. So like in the case of Autumn, for example, I mean, she was just hungry to learn, hungry to know, hungry to contribute. And so I feel like the input that I give to somebody usually matches their hunger for it. And that's something I learned over the years. I remember I used to try to convince people, like even in the discipleship level, I used to try to convince people to be discipled. And then I realized Jesus never did that. You know, Jesus said, come follow me. And the ones that followed, the ones that were hungry, the ones that actually participated, that's who he invested in. So I feel like that's actually not a bad rule of thumb for hero making.
Not at all. And I guess I'm trying to figure, I mean, everyone needs to be discipled and we can be part of that conversation. Is there a place when you say, this person's got a future as a leader, everyone's got a future as a disciple, this person has a future as a leader, and you spend more time, less time, or it's still you, Danielle? I mean, so talk to me a little bit more about that. So I'm just understanding your thinking in your process.
Yeah, so I think hunger, and then I also think capacity, like capability.
Okay. There is some capability there. Okay.
Yeah, and demonstrated capabilities.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the ways that I used to do this early on when we had sort of a cell-based model of leadership and church planting is the church, the people that were interested in being church leaders were given like a home group or a small group to grow, to multiply. If they couldn't multiply a small group, it was a rule of thumb that they weren't meant to be a leader. So, I mean, it might not even be their best strength, but we just realize like if you can't multiply a small group of people, then probably church leadership, which is just a macro of that micro, isn't actually in your future. Now, other forms of leadership might be, and let's explore that, but let's stop pretending like you can do something you can't do. So that was a helpful, like, you know, so still, there was still a job to do. There was still empowerment principle at work because people were given this job to, you know, to multiply a small group. But if they couldn't, it wasn't just like a massive failure. It just was, that's probably not going to be where your outlet's going to be. Let's find the one that's for you.
Yeah, I think the key is it's not like leader or out. It's all, there's all kinds of ways to serve and use your gifts for the glory of God. So, Autumn, I'm interested.
About 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know. I was taking a master's degree in leadership at the time. And I stumbled on that classic book, Now Discover Your Strengths.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that book and kind of a light bulb going off on how the body of Christ is supposed to work. And this is, you know, one of the great indictments, I think, against the church, the way we do church, is we have this kind of singular Herculean type leader who is the be all end all, and we don't do team very well. But I think for me, that book and kind of the discovery, planting a church that was more organic and small group based, where there were like a whole bunch of leaders working together for one common mission, it really launched a new thing for me where I was looking for people's strengths and how they contributed to the overall mission versus looking for that one special person.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I'm interested, Autumn, in kind of what, I'm going to remind people how to ask questions before I go throw completely to you, but how much of Danielle's approach to raising up leaders you learned or you tweaked in your own gifting? Before you do, let me remind everybody that we've already got some questions coming in, but you can click the button on your screen if you're watching through, where you clicked into the Exponential site that says Open Chat Window. Again, if you're at Facebook Live, we want you to like and share. Let us see about this free resource, but we can't answer the questions from there. And I want to remind you that Autumn is actually speaking at the Southern California Exponential Conference. Danielle spoke in Orlando earlier this year. I guess we both spoke in Orlando early this year at that conference as well. And so again, you'll hear more from them in the future. But Autumn, so back to your question. Let me remind everyone else to ask questions too. So Autumn, how much like Danielle are you as a leader, developer, as a hero maker, and in what ways are you different?
Yeah, so the ways that I'm the same, and really so much that I've learned from her, is to just bring people in. And it's easy. It doesn't have to be this complicated, you know, I'm going to mentor you and it looks like this, this, and this. It's just, let's come alongside and let's do this together. So I think that I've taken that approach, even with the church that we planted in February with our leaders there, just looking at the people there and saying, let's do this together. And if you're a part of the team, if you're not a part of the team, like, come on in and let's see what it looks like. And how Danielle said, you know, the hunger, I would be the same there as well with the hunger. You see the ones, you know, we've got a team leader within our church and he just stepped in that position and he doubled his team in like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is somebody that's rising to the occasion. I think that the ways that I'm different, I think that I would be, and not saying Danielle's not this, because she totally is, especially to me, how she's been, but just so intentional with so many at the same time. So I'm looking at a leader and saying, man, you're doubling your team. I want to press into you. I want to be meeting with you. I want to give you all of the resources. I want to open every door that I can, and just saying yes to really opening up our lives and our networks, and just giving it as a gift to the people that we see as true heroes and potential leaders.
I like it. And so talk to me a little bit about anything you say, you know, Danielle did it this way. I'm a little wired differently. So I'm going to do it this way.
So Danielle just brought us alongside, and it wasn't formal, and it wasn't, it was just, come with me. Let's do this together. I think for me, when I'm looking at leaders, I'm looking at, okay, this one's gifted in this specific area, and I'm really strategic in making a space for them. And if there's not a space, creating that space for them.
Okay, so a little more, she's a little more organic. You would be a little more structured, and that's a good thing, because there are differences.
Bringing them along.
Yeah, the way we do something. All right, let's get some questions from our people who are watching. Let me remind the folks again that you can click a little open chat window and ask questions there. This is from Andrew Young, who I'm assuming is not the former mayor of Atlanta and the head of the Olympics Committee, but another Andrew Young. But beyond speaking life and possibility, how do we address a congregational culture where too simply people don't respond to the call or serve or lead? So again, someone like, Danielle and Autumn's a great picture of that, but a lot of people just don't want to play. Now, Danielle, I want to go to you first because you sort of pointed out that Jesus went with those who were willing. How do you work with the congregation? You've served in those roles. How do you work with the congregation and how they respond to leadership or not to become leaders?
Well, a couple of quick things off the top of my head. One is inspiration is the highest motivator, I feel like. So the more inspirationally you can paint a picture for leadership. So inspired rather than, I think, duty bound and guilt and shame based sort of invitations to leadership are never successful. So I think to stick in the inspiration and vision category when you're presenting opportunities through the lens of imagination and faith versus, obligation and duty. That's number one. Number two is I think church leaders need to let go of things that aren't working. And I think a lot of church leaders spend a lot of time in maintenance and then often have this great need to kind of fill positions that actually don't work or jive with people's natural strengths, but they feel duty to do it. And I think there needs to be a way more relaxed approach to letting go of things that are not for now, even though they might eventually be for later, to free people up to discover how they're made and how they can work with what they're made. Because if you can liberate people to lead in such a way that it empowers them, where they increase their capacity and feel like they're learning and growing and they're celebrating what's happening, not just you, there's going to be more leaders. I mean, people are going to rise to that occasion, whether they know it or not. That's the other thing is I think if there was less titles and formality and responsibility and a little bit more empowerment and celebration, we'd have a lot more leaders, whether they thought they were or not.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to throw a question to you, but one of the things that Dave talks about in his book, Hero Maker, which a lot of the theme kind of based around exponential, where again, you'll be speaking in Southern California, Dave talks about this. He says, quote, permission giving requires that we learn to lead with a yes. And I wonder, Autumn, as a new leader and as you've been co-pastor there as well, how do you lead with a yes in your ministry? What are some ways you do that?
Yeah. Again, it's, I think just bringing people along and just saying, it's in their heart to do this and you just providing an opportunity for them. I think that getting rid of the thought of how is it going to turn out, because us as leaders, we would, we've developed a culture, we've started a church, and you hope that, somebody would lead and it would turn out this way, or they'd keep and embody the culture of that church. But I think that for me as a new leader, I had to come to grips with, it may not look exactly like me doing it. And that has to be okay, to give room for leaders to grow, to learn and explore their own leadership. There has to be a yes and almost a hands off. And if it, goes in this direction, you just kind of want to help move it back this direction. But it's not like Danielle said, this heavy hand that you're placing, or this, it has to be done this certain way. But the freedom and the yes is so empowering to people that I see.
Yeah, but they do it wrong sometimes, Autumn. So what are we going to do when that happens? I mean, and Dave actually identifies some real fears leaders have to conquer to be permission givers. Failure. I mean, people are going to blow it. Fear of rejection. It's, how's that going to be responded? Fear of loss of control. So back to you, Autumn, and then we'll ask Danielle to answer the same question. I mean, how do you deal with the fact that people are going to blow it?
With a lot of patience. I think knowing that they'll probably blow it going into it is actually very helpful for a leader. So if you have an expectation of, this is the standard that they're going to do, and this is the standard because this is my standard, I think that we as leaders need to let go of that expectation and realize that there are going to be mistakes. And going into it with that mindset and that heart posture, it makes it a lot easier for us as leaders. And when they do blow it, I mean, I think of an example, I was having this girl come and make this, help me with hospitality, and we were hosting this dinner type thing. And there's a certain way that I was hoping it would look. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to let her take this and let her run with it. And she did. And it was totally opposite what I would do. And I just stood there like, do I say something? Do I not? And I just let her go for it. And the next time, I know as a leader to give a little bit clearer direction, but it's worth it to me to have somebody try and make room for failure and realize that's going to be part of it than not try at all. I'd rather them explore and mess up if they need to. And us as leaders, I think that's a big part. Sometimes I didn't feel like me growing up as a leader, I was able to make mistakes. And I feel like that can be the culture even within churches and volunteers. They want to do it right. And I think that if they knew that it's okay if they messed up, and there's people to catch them and help them and coach them. As long as there's that openness, I think it can really be a beautiful thing.
Good. I like how, Danielle, I like how Autumn shared the example of this one young woman that maybe didn't work out and had a mistake. Would you mind sharing the worst mistake you saw Autumn do when you were actually mentoring her? No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But tell us, how do you deal with the question of
That'd be an impossible question anyway.
Yeah.
But Nelson Mandela, I just quoted Nelson Mandela on my Instagram recently with a quote that said, "I never lose, I only learn."
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think that a learning culture goes with like a vision, and hero making culture is to be a learning culture. So here's some words that I memorized. Actually, I had a leader, one of the best leaders I've ever served under, named Jim Nags, who never said no. It was like a policy. So a solid no from him was no response. You didn't hear anything from him. You knew the answer was no. But other than that, it was always yes. And I think this will help, actually, if you get to your yes in terms of an affirmation of missional ideas, and if you can leave the how for next steps, because what people are saying no to is the how, not the initial idea. They're just getting stuck on like the how will we pay for it? How will we man it? How will it happen? And everybody gets stuck on that step, but just don't start with that step. Start with the yes on the, this is amazing, let's figure it out. And then invite people into the how. So how will we do this? And that where there might be some ways of funneling out some things that aren't just gonna work. And then the other thing I was gonna say is memorize these words: pilot, experiment, and trial. Because the other thing that really stops people from launching new initiatives or trying new things or letting people have the capacity to try stuff is we think we're locked into it forever. Try some experiments. Say, we're going to try a pilot. We're going to try an experiment. I use those words almost all the time. So the first run of everything is a pilot, or the first run of everything is a trial, or the first run of everything is an experiment. And then based on how that goes, we'll make sort of a more long-term strategy for where this is going to go. That can really alleviate some of the pressure on a yes posture.
I love it. I love it. Good. And so again, let me remind you, you're watching Exponential Backstage. I'm Ed Stetzer, your host. We've got Danielle Strickland. We've got Autumn Katz. We're having a conversation in and around the theme of Hero Maker. Autumn will actually be speaking at the Southern California Exponential Conference. Brooks, put those up again so people are aware what's coming up. Danielle already spoken in Orlando as well. I want to encourage you, invite you to join us. You can see the dates listed there from Washington, D.C., Southern California, Bay Area, Houston, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, which of course will be the best one, and New York, and not because I'm not even going to be there, but I'm excited about the fact that it's in Chicago, because that's the best city that's out there, the city of
there.
So we're going to be there. So it's going to be good. So it's actually, by the way, on just a little extra intro, I'm sure probably, Danielle, I could be wrong, you're probably quoting Nelson Mandela, maybe because you generally do, but it was 100th birthday that his 100th birthday came up. Yeah. So Billy Graham's 100th birthday is November 7th. And if you're at the Exponential Conference in Chicago, there'll be a special mention of that as well. So you'll want to mention that as well. So, okay, so kind of some questions coming in. We've had some good questions. We'll remind you, you can just go to the chat box, put them there. A guy named David Bachman, and this kind of comes right back to Danielle, what you were saying. You were talking about trials and experiments. But his question is, when you have someone go for tryouts for leadership, is the potential candidate aware that he or she is kind of being tried out? Do they know? Do you disclose this to this person, or do you kind of just, because somebody's talking about we're trying a thing. What about when you're trying out a person? Go to Danielle first, and then Autumn.
Yeah, I would say it applies to both, unless it's somebody that's already a leader on your team and you're just going like, actually, now I'm going to try you out. I think it's too late then. So I think for those people, what you're really wanting to try out are maybe new roles or new strategies for them to lead in their strengths, instead of trying to like get them to manage all the weak areas of their life. So there might be some adjustment in teams that you already have and leaders that you already use. But I think when you're bringing people on, especially, I think experimentation even in role is a good idea. To say right from the start, what do you see? And this is also a different approach. William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, well, the co-founder, he founded it with his wife, but he used to always put it like this: the need is the call. Which is a really interesting thing, because sometimes I think in a leadership culture, what we do is you have to discover your strengths now, and then you have to say what it is that you want to do. But sometimes, as a young leader, I had to do a whole bunch of things because I had to do them. And it was in having to do them that I discovered some of the things that I loved and was most gifted at. So sometimes it's even to say, okay, this is the vision and here's a need we have. There's a hole in this vision. And somebody's saying, I want to try that. And then seeing both of those things as experimental, like, let's try it and see what could happen. And if both of them are experimental, the leader has the ability, besides just saying, I don't feel called anymore, and wrapped up into this like pseudo spirituality kind of failure thing, can say, I tried that and here's what I discovered from the process. And one, it could be, I discovered I'm amazing at this and want to do it for the rest of my life. And two, I discovered I never want to do that again, but thanks for the opportunity. And likewise with the need, I think you discover things based on need. People try things that they wouldn't maybe normally try or wouldn't discover in their own life if you didn't have a vision that kind of made it possible for them to give it a go. But if you have an experimental attitude with the outcome on both levels, both program wise, we tried this program and it was a dumb idea, it didn't work, so now we don't do this anymore, or we do it a different way. And also on a leadership level, this leader tried leading in this way and they love it, and now we discovered this is the way of their future, or that doesn't work, and that's okay. Let's find another place where you lead. I think both are important.
Good. Autumn, I'm going to ask a different question to you because we're a little running out of time. I do want to remind you, if you have any questions, we got a couple more minutes, so you can pop those into the chat box. This is an anonymous question, Autumn, which always makes us a little nervous sometimes, but how do you deal with people who are power hungry, who maybe they don't get, you don't get any accountability from them after you put them in a leadership position? You had an experience with that, Autumn, and what have you done?
Yeah, definitely. So with accountability, I feel like it's a conversation for leaders and, church leaders to have with those volunteers and those team leaders at the front end. And so if you set the standard and set the culture of we value communication, and you actually create a plan for communication, I think that it can help with some of those tensions where they're either power hungry or they're not communicating. Something that we do with our team leaders is we say, let's on-ramp for 3 months. Let's give it a try. And then let's off-ramp, or let's have a conversation and see if your heart's coming alive in this. See if it's something that fits into your strengths. We're passionate about strength-based leadership. And we really want our team leads to explore themselves and to step into what God's called them to do in whatever capacity, in whatever team they're on, and help facilitate that and develop that. So I think going in with communication, if somebody's power hungry, man, you walk carefully. And I think that the vulnerability of just having good conversation and say, hey, let's talk about what's in your heart for this role. Why are you attracted to this position? Let's talk, and just getting to know them as people. I think that a lot of the times as leaders, we bring people on to positions and we miss that relational and that friendship piece with them. And I think if you tap into that, it really helps to even break down, why are they power hungry? Why are they moving in this direction? So communication on the front end, I think, is key to cross over some of those hurdles.
I like that redemptive approach. A question from Scott. We'll send it to you, Danielle. Beyond the negative results, how have you seen leaders exceed your expectations or do a better job, maybe even than you could have?
Oh, like all the time. I think one, I'm pretty tapped into my own limitations, so it makes it a pretty easy task in some ways. But all the time, I see people do better than me in terms of church growth and church planning and missional training. I mean, Autumn can administrate her way around a hurricane, and I can't administrate my way out of a paper bag. In terms of, she was being really kind earlier, but in terms of administration, I literally have zero skills. So in terms of structure and systems and people taking, I tend to be a starter, not a grower. So in many ways, I'm amazed at, I can start some things, but I'm amazed at the skills of leaders that have taken what I've started and built it into something much more beautiful. And better than I ever could have imagined. So I see it a lot. I think just really seeing people find how they're made and who they are and releasing them to be that. And then you move into, I think hero makers move in from a yes to a celebrate posture, where we just get to celebrate what God has done through other people. It's really a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I was actually in a car once with a guy named Glenn Burris. He's the leader of the Foursquare denomination. We were in New Orleans doing some stuff after Katrina. Someone in the car, actually it might have been even me, I don't remember, was talking about a pastor in the town and could we get this pastor involved? And again, I don't, if it was me, if I remember it was me, I'd confess it was me. But what me or somebody said, I'm not so sure, that pastor so-and-so. And Glenn, he very, very graciously and kindly, he didn't say it in a mean way, he said, I noticed that some people try to look to ways to disqualify people, and some people are also looking for ways to qualify people and say, you know, this could be a person that really could be a good partnership thing. And it wasn't, no one received it as a rebuke. It was a casual thing in the midst of a conversation. But that was a decade plus ago, and I still remember it. How do we get to the posture when we're looking to find and help and elevate, and if there are rough edges, to help with those, rather than the kind of immediate impulse some have to disqualify? We'll go to Danielle first and then to Autumn.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a whole posture shift that is kind of key, I think, in life, not just in leadership. But for me, this really started happening right around that now discover your strength thing. So instead of looking and asking people to look for what they were bad at, I actually started asking people to look for what they were good at. So that actually started even the conversation. Even when I looked at myself, instead of seeing the glaring weaknesses of my life, I started to see the places where I was strong, and really starting to call those things out. And one of the things I started practicing at the time was a little thing called words have power. And words have power was this phrase that I started to discipline my mouth to match a positive attitude. So I would actually use elastic band therapy. I'd put an elastic band on. And every time I would criticize or speak poor of somebody, even myself, so every time I would call myself stupid for not having the right answer at the right time or whatever it was, I would snap the elastic band. And it would cause some physical pain, not a lot, but it caused enough physical pain to retrain my brain to think that when I spoke negatively of people or myself, it caused pain. It inflicted something, which is, of course, in the scriptures, the power of the tongue to bring death or to bring life. And I wanted to train my tongue to bring life. So it really disciplined me. Like 20 years ago, I started to discipline my tongue to speak life. And what was really amazing is that it started to impact the way I spoke about everything and everyone. So even denominations, you know, I have the privilege, like you, Ed, of going to various denominations and seeing the strengths of the denominations instead of seeing the critique. I always see the strength and the beautiful color that it brings to the body of Christ and try to celebrate it. I think I can trace that back to 20 years ago when I started wearing an elastic band to discipline my tongue to speak positively and life-giving words of affirmation.
Wow, I'm trying to think if that's like a Wesleyan holiness thing where you actually would do that, because I'm thinking my people, they would just rest in grace and not maybe change as much. So I need more intentionality in that. Autumn, let's go the same question to you.
Yeah, I would agree with Danielle, seeing the strength in people and being able to have, like, we've talked about those I see in you conversations and the belief in them, and keeping the beauty of who the volunteers, who the leaders are in front of us. And a way that I try to lead is always, yes, seeing their strengths and seeing the good, but again, carrying the heart of God and speaking that forth every opportunity I get with the leaders, and tracing it back to, this is what I see in you, and this is the heart of God that I feel for you. So yeah, strengths and passions.
Good deal. Again, thank you so much to our guests. We've had a lot of good questions there. Our guests have been Autumn Katz and Danielle Strickland. Autumn will be speaking at the Southern California Exponential coming up. Brooks, go ahead and put those on the screen one more time. This has been Exponential Backstage. We've been able to take lots of your questions. Didn't get to them all. My apologies. You can engage more, though, at our regional conferences. You can see them on the screen, or go to exponential.org/2018. Again, if you're watching on Facebook, like and share so other people can see this free resource. Engage in the conferences that are listed here as well. Thanks to my guest. Thanks to Exponential. And thanks for our viewers and listeners who joined us today. Peace out.